everyone. So, as Jason said, I'm Mary Thengvall. And if you haven't met Ember Dog, this is Ember Dog. Hi. Go boy. All right. So, I know a lot of people up here today have been talking about how to improve your code, how to improve websites, how to monitor things, all of those types of things. And those are really, really awesome and important topics. I'm not up here to talk to you about that. So I'm here to talk to you about making sure that those of us who are responsible for the websites, responsible for the code, responsible for teams, are also monitoring ourselves. So I'm going to walk through a couple things. I'll walk through who I am and why it's even more important for me to monitor myself. And then, since it's not all about me, I'll switch to why it's important for all of us to monitor ourselves. And then lastly, we'll talk about how to take care of both ourselves and our teams in order to prevent burnout. So first of all, who am I? I'm someone who loves Calvin and Hobbes is the first thing you should know. So there's some shout outs in there. I am a community manager and a builder, both by trade and by nature. I'm currently leading the developer relations team at a company called SparkPost. Is anyone familiar? Couple hands? Awesome. Yay. So we are an email delivery and analytics platform for developers. We have an API that allows you to easily, programmatically send emails to your application. I also have a few side projects that I do in my copious spare time. But I love them, so that I do them. First is I'm a co-host of a podcast called Community Pulse. It's about things that we community professionals care about, from analytics and ROI to how to manage our teams, how to maintain our personal lives, all those types of things. I also help manage what's called the Evangelist Collective, which is a Slack community for people who do similar things that I do. And I'm also in the process of writing a book about the business value of developer relations. Should be, fingers crossed, out in 2018, early 2018, so you can wish me luck. But in case you hadn't noticed, I'm really passionate about providing resources for developer relations. I'm also really passionate about burnout, which is, like I said, what I'm here to talk about today. I live in San Francisco. I used to refer to my apartment as an expensive storage unit, but luckily these days I actually get to spend some time there. This picture is of Ember and I at the top of Tank Hill. As you can see, I'm definitely not someone who looks like I need a service dog, which is convenient considering my service dog doesn't look like a normal service dog. But I am in fact someone who benefits from having a medical alert service dog by my side. So I'm going to explain a little bit about my background and how Ember became my service dog. This is a picture of me at 3 years old. I've got the awesome striped kitty dress, which was my favorite dress. I've got my pigtails tied with yarn because that was awesome as well, and a newly acquired medical alert bracelet on my left wrist. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 2.5, and it's amazing to me how many things, despite how young I was at that point, are kind of defined by that moment. There's no doubt that my life would have been drastically different without diabetes. And also, there's a lot of misconceptions about diabetes. So, for you to just understand a little bit about how much it's changed my life, you need to understand a little bit about what type 1 diabetes is and isn't. So there are 29 million Americans that have some form of diabetes. That's pre-diabetes, type 1, type 2, gestational, but only 5% of us are type 1. So for obvious reasons, the majority of the research, the knowledge base, the understandings that are out there are geared towards type 2, which leads to a lot of misconceptions like this. So first of all, it's not caused by excessive weight or not taking care of yourself. It's not caused by your parents feeding you too much sugar as a kid, contrary to what one of my high school friends used to try and tell me. And it is not preventable. It is an autoimmune disease. Your body essentially attacks itself and kills off your pancreas, which helps you process food. And it's chronic. So while it's treatable, it doesn't have a cure. This is a little bit of an idea of what it takes for me to deal with diabetes on a regular basis. The picture on the left up here gives you some of the resources and things that I carry with me on a regular basis, from tech to just glucose tabs and things to help with low blood sugar. The picture on the right is some of the devices that I wear. So I have an insulin pump, I have a continuous glucose monitor, and those help balance the amount of insulin that insulin that I'm receiving to help process the food, as well as keep track of what my blood sugar is on a regular basis. In its most basic terms, it means I've probably pricked my finger about 65,000 times to figure out what my blood sugar is since I was diagnosed. I'd done about 8,000 shots of insulin before getting an insulin pump, and since then I've put in probably around 2,300 new insulin pumps since I got those. That doesn't count learning your like 13, 15, and 17 times tables when you're really little, which is a weird thing to do, but yay, counting carbs and figuring out insulin dosages. Anyways, so in short, diabetes sucks. It involves a lot of number counting, a lot of thinking, a lot of precaution, but it also doesn't stop me from doing the things that I love doing. It also doesn't stop me from being independent and stubborn, which for those of you who know me, you know that I am. And so for a long time, I've been really, really determined to do everything on my own. I don't need to rely on other people. I don't need to make sure that I have plans. You know, everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be me. I can handle this. And then Ember came along. So about 9 years ago now, I got Ember as a pet. Had zero intention of traveling with him as a service dog or anything else, but a few years after I got him, he started waking me up in the middle of the night. And I eventually figured out that every time that he did, my blood sugar was dropping pretty soon after that. So he was monitoring me. He was picking up on the chemical imbalance in my system and alerting me when my blood sugar was starting to get too low and when I was asleep and couldn't do anything about it. So long story short, sorry, sirens are a fun issue that we run into. So long story short, he travels with me everywhere now, serving as a medical alert dog. And bonus, come here, an easy way for me to be found at conferences. As you can tell, even though he's a service dog, he's still really, really well trained, but he is still a dog. So we run into issues like this every once in a while, but for the most part, he does a really great job. And he helps me be able to monitor myself and keep track of what I need to do to take care of myself. So how does this affect you, other than getting to meet Ember and enjoying seeing a dog at a conference? A few more numbers real quick. So 7% of the population in the US admit that they struggle with some sort of mental disability or illness, including depression. An important key there is that that's only the people who are willing to say that they struggle with those things. So that number is probably actually higher. Diabetics, so for me, we're 3 times more likely to struggle with depression because of the mental and emotional toll that dealing with a chronic illness takes. But this number that's down here is the biggest number on the screen, and to me it's the most important. 49% of people in tech, particularly managers, leaders, founders of companies, struggle with depression, and also something that's closely related, which is burnout. And that number is huge, and to me that's really, really not okay. So say you're not a manager, say you're not a founder, that's fine too, but all of us here do work in tech. So I did a quick Google search for burnout in tech. Can anyone see what the number at the top of the screen there is that says the number of results? 2 million. So let's say, hypothetically, let's say only 10% of those are accurate and relevant and not copies of articles and things like that. That's still over 200,000 results. So I think it's safe to say that there's a problem. So for those of you who are giving me this look right now, I'm not up here to be a downer. I'm not up here to say all of us struggle with burnout and all of us have to take care of ourselves and all of those things. But I do know that it is a problem. I do know that it's an issue either affecting you or your coworkers or your team, likely affecting more than just one person in your company. It's a problem in our industry, and we need to fix it. That needs to start with us. So I think the first thing we need to do is figure out what causes burnout from the start. So there's 2 different books that I'll reference today, and they're both fantastic resources. I'd encourage you to pick them up when you have a chance. The first is called Overwhelmed, and it covers time management. It covers some observations about culture in the US, as well as other cultures, workplace environments, things like that. And then The Truth About Burnout gives some basic causes of burnout, and they resonate pretty well with everything that I've both heard and felt I'm not going to cover everything in there today, but I'd encourage you to pick up copies and take a look. So the first piece of this is the idea of trying to juggle too much. One of the easiest ways to cover burnout is to switch jobs, to get a new job within the company, find a new company, figure out different ways to move things off your plate, stuff like that. But unless, sorry, my slides are auto-advancing. Unless you're taking care of the problem, then you're only covering up the symptoms. So that's a problem that I know all too well. It gives us new challenges, gives us new things to invest our time in, but it doesn't actually solve the problem. It just masks it and makes things more manageable for a short while longer. The second and third causes are unfairness and insufficient reward. So I'm sure you all know someone, or maybe it's you, who's the go-to person for everyone's questions. You're the person who, when issues pop up or when someone needs code review, you're the person that they go to, which is great. But what happens when all of that starts to feel unfair or unbalanced? What happens when the reward isn't worth it? And there's been a lot of articles in Forbes and Entrepreneur magazine, in Applied Social Psychology, a whole bunch of places recently, that state past a certain income, past a certain monetary reward, money is no longer a motivator. It only gets us so far, and after that we need more things, more connection points, more things that we're actually interested in that are going to actually motivate us to continue doing the job. Reason number 4, I bet you can guess it, work overload. So in a conversation with a close friend, when I was in the middle of burnout a couple years ago, I said this. I said, it's the constant overwhelmedness factor, the overflowing inbox, the never being in my San Francisco home long enough to actually clean and get things organized the way I want them to be, the to-do list that's 5 pages long and only ever seems to grow, not shrink, and the burden of feeling like I'm the only one who can do all of these things. So Kanban boards, backlogs, things like that are great. But what about when the backlogs are overflowing and the teams are too lean to actually work as a lean team? Reason 5 is a lack of community. When we spend so much time investing in work and code and learning new skills, which are all great things, like I mentioned before, we sometimes fail to invest in our personal lives. So we start to drift away from the circle of people that are closest to us. We start to, in our spare time, be working on projects that we're excited about, which is great, but we aren't connecting with the people around us. We aren't building the community that we need who will be there for us when things go south. As my friend Jason says, community is those people who come looking for you when you don't show up. And I think all of us need to find those people in our lives. So at this point, you're either looking at me like this, saying, okay, what do I do? Or like this, realizing that you might already be on the road to burnout or have been there for quite some time. And for those of you who have come to that realization, I'm really sorry. But it gets better, I promise. So now that we've recognized what causes burnout, how do we prevent it? And what can we do if we're already there? The first step and the most important step, and if this is the only thing that you hear me say all day, that's okay, put yourself first. It's not selfish, it's necessary. Airlines are constantly reminding us to put our own oxygen masks on before we help other people, and that's not because they care less about the kids or people who are disabled or who can't help themselves on the planes. It's because quite literally, if we aren't getting the oxygen that we need to be able to keep ourselves going strong, we aren't going to be able to help other people. So putting on that mask first, doing the things that give you energy, and not just net energy, but actual pure energy, things that make you excited, things that get you talking about, things that have just happened or places that you've been or things like that are huge. And you need to set aside that time to do those things. Otherwise, you're short-selling your work commitments, you're short-selling your team, you're lining yourself up for burnout. So here's some ways that we can make sure that we're getting enough oxygen on a regular basis. First thing is step away from your laptop. And I know that that's hard to say, and I know that's even harder to do, but I think everyone needs to sometimes carefully throw their laptop aside and actually do other things. Part of the fun of being a developer is being able to solve problems for people. But when we find ourselves working really long hours in order to meet unrealistic deadlines or review just one more pull request, or figure out just one more bug, there's a problem. I have a friend who has a sign on his monitor that says, "Is the world on fire? If no, stop. If yes, call a firefighter." And there's two really important things here, even though it sounds kind of silly. First of all, we aren't expected to be online 24/7. And if that is the expectation, then you need to have a conversation with your manager. It shouldn't be the case. It really shouldn't. Doesn't matter how small or big your team is, doesn't matter what your role is, it doesn't matter what's going on if you're the only experienced person on the team. But we shouldn't be, that general expectation of having to be online at all times shouldn't be there. And yes, there's going to be times when the site breaks or when the API goes down or when things need to be fixed, but those should be the exception, not the rule. So like I said, talk to your manager about that if that's the situation you find yourself in, and if that doesn't work, I'm guessing that there's people here today that are hiring that would be very happy to pick you up. The second thing, there are always other people who will step up and take responsibility for getting things done when you can't. We're not responsible to fix everyone's problems, no matter how much it feels like it. I actively make sure that I don't have access to our support ticketing system, even though I'm on our developer relations team, because we have a whole customer support team that handles that. I actively make sure that both myself and my teammates are not responsible to be on the sales calls to answer technical questions, because we have a sales engineering team to do that. And the second that we put ourselves in that situation of, oh, well, yeah, I can cover that thing this one time, then that becomes the expectation of, well, they're willing to do that more and more. And I'm actively allowing people to take advantage of me, actively allowing other people to put more work on my plate, rather than allowing them to reach out to the people who can actually help them the most. Second thing that we can do is learn to say no. And the easiest way to do this is to get your manager's buy-in. Have them agree that, anytime someone approaches you for work that's not currently on your plate, that you have to go to your manager and say, hey, someone just asked me to help out with this project. Someone just asked me to fix these bugs. Where does that fit within my current priorities? How do I make that work with the other things that I have on my plate? And if you make them the bad guy, which is actually kind of their job, then they'll hopefully protect you because you're a precious asset to the team. The other thing we need to say no to sometimes is saying no to our personal life, because occasionally you just need time to focus on yourself. And speaking of personal time, use your calendar. There's two ways that I tend to use my calendar for just this reason. First of all, time boxing things, including personal time to recharge. So, if I know I have a major project that I'm working on, whether it's a new application or writing some documentation, whatever category it falls into, I'll throw 3 hours of time on my calendar. If you use Google Calendars, they have an amazing thing, which I think is in Google Labs still, where you can actually turn on an autoresponder when you have a time box thing on your calendar and say no, like actually auto-decline these events that come through. And I love that because it doesn't even give you the option of accepting other things that break into that time. And then also, if there's times when you need to be offline to really focus, let your team know that you're going to be offline or on Do Not Disturb, whatever it happens to be. And unless something's actively on fire, ask them to not get a hold of you. And then remember the rule about if things are on fire, there are probably other people who can solve that problem. The second way that I use my calendar really well is planning for vacation. I was just talking to someone earlier today about how I have a habit of always having a trip on my calendar so that it gives me something to look forward to. It gives me something to plan for personally. I have a travel bug. I love traveling, love checking out new places. And so having that, even just that small peak on the horizon of like, okay, I get to plan a trip for this place that I've been really excited about, can give me a lot of energy, a lot of motivation to work towards something. Some people might say, I don't have time for vacation, or things are really busy right now and I'll take vacation when things calm down. How many of you who say I'll take vacation when things actually calm down notice that things ever actually calm down? Yeah, okay, maybe one or two. But generally, when that's our mindset of like, well, things are busy, I don't have time, it keeps getting pushed off, and never actually taken, which isn't good, right? We all need a break. We all need a chance to step away, throw our laptops to the side, those types of things. I worked for a company a while ago that had unlimited vacation time, and it works really, really well when there's also a minimum vacation time that you have to take throughout the year. I know there's a lot of companies who are kind of moving away from unlimited vacation because it causes some issues with people never actually hitting their maximum amount of vacation, and so they aren't tending to take it because they don't have to, because they're still accruing technically. But I had a manager that was having a hard time finding time to plan a vacation, figuring out when to take it, and one of the upper management in the company actually came to him and said, look, if you genuinely can't find the time to book your vacation, tell me your travel budget and give me information about like do's and don'ts of things that you are or are not interested in. I will book your vacation for you because it's that important that you get away and have a break so that you can come back refreshed and relaxed. This last thing about vacation and time boxing, at the very, very least, we all have 4 hours every 2 weeks that we can take out of our normal workday. And I know some of you are going to be rolling your eyes and saying, I don't actually have that amount of time, but let me explain. So this will help with your productivity. This will help you see the bigger picture. It'll help you get a better idea of the problems that you actually need to be tackling. And it really is just 4 hours every 2 weeks. So keep in mind, I'm one of you. I fully understand how busy we all are and how hard it is to keep everything going and get everything done. One of my good friends, J. Paul Reed, came to me a while back with this idea of a 4-hour decompress. And it's, like I said, a time to reflect, to evaluate, to recenter our goals before tackling another work week. And it's only 4 hours every 2 weeks. So it's 4 hours out of every 80, 4 hours that make you stronger, make you more effective, more efficient, more motivated, which are all things that your manager should be fully on board with. And I'll explain a little more about it and some of the value that I get out of it as well. So basically, here's what it involves. You find a place where you can relax, you can get comfortable, you can spread out, you dig in, whether that's a coffee shop, a library, a hiking trail, wherever you feel calm and comfortable. And during the first hour, you deliberately disconnect from your normal day-to-day work. So use that first hour to send the last emails or close down programs on your laptop or put your laptop aside completely. Kind of get your brain disconnected from work. So I'll usually finalize any work stuff that I have to do and then go for a run or go for a good walk with Ember to kind of get my brain off of work things. And then during those second and third hours, find something that's constructive and helpful but allows me to stay disconnected. So for me, it's usually if I'm exploring a new programming language, I'll go poke around at that for a little while or read a business book that I'm invested in or whiteboard the latest topic I've been looking into. So things that are work related but aren't going to be on my computer on a regular basis. And then as you wind down in that last hour, it kind of brings it all back together. So I'll usually journal a little bit about what I'm learning, how I'm feeling about work, how I'm feeling about burnout, make a list of things that I want to tackle when I'm back online, and then start packing back up. And it sounds relatively straightforward and simple, but those 4 hours can really serve to help me think through things and, like I mentioned, get a bigger picture of what's going on. So it's taking yourself out of the day-to-day. I have to write this application. I have to fix this bug. I have to find this problem in this thing, and allowing you to see the problems overall, allowing you to get a better idea of what strategy you should use to tackle things coming up and what the plan should be going forward. Next, when you're sick, be sick and let yourself be sick. I'll be honest, I'm really, really bad at this one, but seriously, take advantage of sick days, personal days, whatever they're called at your work, and call in sick and then actually allow yourself to get better. So don't call in from home, don't work from home, just let yourself be sick and rest and relax, and you'll be amazed at how much more quickly you actually heal and are able to get back to work. And along these same lines, when you're needing mental care, get it. Mental illness, depression, anxiety, all of these things are normal and important, and medical conditions just like a broken hand, tendonitis, all the things that could happen that you'll need to take actual medical time for as well. Don't let anyone tell you differently. So get help and start by taking a look at your company insurance policy. There's been a couple places that I've worked that actually write into your insurance policy, like you have up to 4 sessions that you can go see a psychologist, psychiatrist, counselor type of a thing. And a previous coworker of mine used to take those days and would find a different counselor every time and just like 4 days, once a year, kind of go in and word vomit all over them, and doesn't matter what he says and doesn't matter, how they receive it. But it allowed him to kind of get things off of his chest and work through stuff and make sure that he was doing well and had thought things through in such a way that he would be able to continue through the rest of the year. Next, find your own communities and do what you can to invest in that community. I know it might come as a surprise to some of you, but meetup.com is for more than just tech talks. It has interest groups and running groups and hiking groups, and I don't know what all is in Nashville, but I'm sure it has a lot of those groups in Nashville as well. But use it to find people who are interested in similar hobbies, to connect with people in your city outside of tech. And then this last one really helps me find places that connect with you, that make you feel peaceful, that make you feel still, that give you energy back, like I was talking about earlier. When I'm home, that's the ocean for me, hands down. When I'm on the road, it's a park or exploring a city or just getting out for some quiet time on my own. But find those places both at home and on the road so that you can go and find some peace when you need it. So like I said earlier, I struggled with burnout a couple years ago, and I burned out really, really hard. I obviously don't have a medical background. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical professional. But all of this is based on personal experience and things that have worked for me. Part of the reason why it took me so long to be able to get back up and running after I burned out is because I didn't do most of these things. I wasn't taking advantage of the people around me. I wasn't closing my laptop when I should have been. I wasn't paying attention to how I was feeling and what I was doing. And it only served to hurt me more. Simply because I was scared about the repercussions and the perception and how people were going to receive it. But these days, I'm lucky enough to have that community, both personally and professionally, who I know will look out for me and check in on me. And I say the phrase lucky enough, but it really took some work and took me giving it a try and putting myself out there. But it's worth it. It's completely worth it. So I'd encourage you to take a moment, look around you. Everyone in this room understands the situations that you're in on a day-to-day basis, how pressing and stressful our jobs can be, what it's like to need time to yourself, as well as needing a community to rally around you. This is your community. These are your people, whether or not you know everyone in the room. And it's important for us to put that priority there and to make sure that we're connecting with those people so that when we need them, that they will be there for us and we are able to admit that we're not okay and able to admit that we need some help. I love this slide in particular because I can't count the number of times that I've received virtual hugs when I've needed them most. So even though, or even if we don't all live near each other, connecting with your community online can be a huge help as well. You've got people at your fingertips at almost any time of day who would be more than happy to talk you through things and empathize with where you're at. And don't underestimate the value of that. Lastly, don't underestimate the value of you. We're valuable, we're important, we're influential, we're worth taking care of. And quoting from Overwhelmed, which I mentioned earlier, the author, Bridget, found herself talking to Danish women who seemingly have all the time in the world for leisure and feel no guilt about it, but also manage to get things done in a timely fashion. The woman that she's speaking with said, having leisure time for myself isn't something we even have to discuss. It's just natural. Bridget replies to her, you don't feel guilty or selfish that you're neglecting your children or worried about the to-do list? The woman gave me a blank look. I think Danish women, she said, perhaps know their worth. And I agree with that, right? We don't always feel like we're worth it to take that amount of time to be selfish, even if it's not actually selfish. And we need to understand that we are worth taking care of. So I talked through who I am, why I'm here, why Ember's here, my journey with diabetes and my struggle with burnout. We've talked a little bit about you, some of the numbers around depression and burnout in people in tech, as well as some of the specifics of what causes burnout. And we also touched on a few ways that managers can keep an eye on their teams. We also talked about what to do about burnout. Sorry. How to prevent it, as well as how to slowly recover from it. And it is a slow recovery. I was probably about 60 to 70% when I finally went back to work after I was burned out. I was lucky enough to be able to take some time off from work. And some days are awesomely productive these days, and every once in a while I have some that are horrifically bad. But most days they're somewhere in the middle, and most importantly, I know that it's real. I know that it's something I don't need to be ashamed of, and I know that I have a community to help me. So I'm going to close with a quote from an article in the Community Roundtable called The Dark Side of Community Management, which is what I'm involved in. I believe it also applies here, though. They say, passion, our jobs, our open source projects, whatever things that you're passionate about is what drives you and gives your life meaning. Obsession is what happens when you're fixated on something, forsaking all the rest. Understand the difference between passion and obsession to change your thoughts and actions. Find balance by cultivating other interests offline. So today, let's be awesome, let's be incredible, let's be passionate, but let's also be balanced. Thank you.